An organized crime group was active from 1929 to 1941. It acted as the enforcement arm of the National Crime Syndicate, a closely connected criminal organization that included and was started by the Irish mob and included Italian-American mafia, the Jewish mob, and other criminal organizations in New York City and elsewhere. In the depths of the Great Depression, a different kind of enterprise took root. This was no ordinary business. This was Murder Incorporated. From 1929 to 1941, this mob of assassins cast a long, terrifying shadow over New York City. They were the iron fist of organized crime, silencing enemies with chilling efficiency. Their reign of terror left a trail of blood and fear in its wake. These weren't hardened criminals from birth. They were products of their environment. Poverty, desperation, and the allure of power lured them into the abyss. Murder, Inc. was believed to be responsible for between 400 and 1,000 contract killings. The streets they ruled were their jungle. Survival was the only law, composed of Irish, Jewish, and Italian-American gangsters, and members mainly recruited from poor and working-class Irish, Jewish, and Italian neighborhoods in Manhattan and Brooklyn. At the helm of this murderous machine stood Lepke Buchalter, a ruthless mob kingpin with an icy demeanor. In the early 1930s, Buchalter created an effective process for performing contract killings. It had no name, but 10 years later called it Murder, Inc. Buchalter was one of the premier labor union racketeers in New York City during that era. In 1935, law enforcement estimated that Buchalter had 250 men working for them, and that Buchalter was grossing over $1 million. He was the brains, the strategist, the one who called for blood. But he needed executioners, and that's where Jacob Gura Shapiro came in, his childhood friend and mobster. Shapiro was a terrifying figure, a hulking brute with a hair-trigger temper. He assembled a team of killers, each more ruthless than the last. There was Abe Kid Twist Reles, a homicidal maniac who turned informant. His testimony would later crack the organization wide open. Then came Bugsy Siegel, notorious for his charm and brutality in equal measure. He moved easily between the worlds of glamour and violence. Together, they formed a deadly alliance, a brotherhood of blood. Murder, Inc. operated with chilling precision. Through force and fear, they began gaining control of the garment industry unions. Buchalter used the unions to threaten strikes and demand weekly payments from factory owners. They were masters of their craft, turning assassination into a gruesome art form. Ice picks, lead pipes and Tommy guns were their tools of the trade, their instruments of death. Victims were often lured into traps, unsuspecting of the fate that awaited them. A knock on the door, a friendly face, and then oblivion. Bodies piled up in alleyways, trunks of cars, and the murky depths of the East River. Their methods were brutal, efficient, and designed to send a message. Fear was their currency, and they spent it liberally. The police were outmatched, outgunned, and often out of their depth. The list of their victims is long and grim. Informants, rivals, anyone who dared to cross their path. One particularly gruesome murder was that of Walter Sage, a candy store owner who witnessed a mob hit. He was stabbed dozens of times, his body left to rot in an empty lot. The sheer brutality of the act sent shockwaves through the city. The newspapers dubbed it the Candy Store Massacre. In a fateful decision, the National Crime Syndicate ordered the killing of notorious gangster Dutch Schultz. The gangster had openly challenged the syndicate's authority by vowing to kill District Attorney Thomas Dewey, a move that could have triggered a devastating crackdown. Buchalter was tasked with eliminating Dutch Schultz after the gangster defied the National Crime Syndicate's orders. Schultz was shot in a Newark, New Jersey tavern and succumbed to his injuries the following day. Another infamous hit was that of Joe the Boss Masseria, a powerful mafia don. Gunned down in a Coney Island restaurant, his death marked a turning point in gangland warfare. The police weren't blind to the carnage on the streets. They knew a force was at work, an organized killing machine. Whispers of Murder, Inc. began to circulate in the precinct houses, but fear had long tentacles. Witnesses were intimidated into silence. Those who dared to speak often met untimely ends. The organization was shrouded in secrecy, a phantom menace. Detective Johnny Broderick made it his personal mission to bring them down. He knew the streets, knew the players, and he was determined to break the code of silence. As the body count rose, so did the pressure on law enforcement. The public demanded justice, newspapers screamed for arrests. The district attorney's office formed a special task force dedicated to crushing Murder, Inc. They started piecing together the puzzle, following the money, turning informants, exploiting rivalries within the organization. The net was closing in, but the key to dismantling the operation lay in the shadows. One name kept surfacing in their investigation: Abe "Kid" Twist Rells. He was a loose cannon, a wild card, but he was also their best shot at bringing down the empire. In a stunning turn of events, Reel, also known as Abraham "Kid" Twist Reels, who was a hitman for Murder, Inc., facing a potential death sentence, turned state's evidence. He became the prosecution's star witness, his testimony a bombshell that threatened to blow the case wide open. In 1940, Reelis was implicated in a number of killings. Realizing that he faced execution if convicted, Reelis became a government witness. He spilled secrets, named names, and revealed the inner workings of Murder, Inc. His testimony was chilling, detailed, and impossible to ignore. The courtroom became a stage for a real-life gangster drama. For the first time, the public heard first-hand accounts of the organization's brutality. The city listened with a mixture of horror and fascination as Rayleigh spun his tale of murder and mayhem. With Reelis as their guide, the prosecution built a formidable case. One by one, the members of Murder, Inc. were apprehended, tried, and convicted. Reelis implicated his boss, Lepke Buchalter, in the murder of Brooklyn candy store owner Joseph Rosen. Lepke Buchalter, the mastermind, was apprehended in 1939. The trial was a media sensation. The public was captivated by the downfall of these once untouchable criminals. Justice, it seemed, had finally prevailed. Buchalter was sentenced to death. On March 4, 1944, Lepke Buchalter, the last of the Murder, Inc. bosses, was executed. The reign of terror was over. The legacy of Murder, Inc. continues to fascinate and horrify. Their story became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dark side of the American dream. The organization's downfall marked a turning point in the fight against organized crime. It exposed the brutal reality of the mob and forced law enforcement to develop new strategies to combat it. But the shadows of Murder, Inc. still linger, a reminder that even in the darkest corners of society, justice can prevail. The streets may forget, but history remembers.